All right. Welcome to episode 5 of Davos Watch, where we keep an eye on the global elites from Davos to the UN and all the other advocates of global fascism and totalitarian technocracy. So this week, our story comes to my attention from the G20's released policy recommendations document they released after the summit wrapped. The G20, as I explained in the previous episode of Davos Watch, is an international forum for economic cooperation and policy coordination composed of the world's major economies. They meet annually to coordinate and discuss issues relating to financial stability, trade issues, climate change, or things that are generally global in scope. Agreements are struck, goals are often set, and policy recommendations are published. And this year, the policy recommendations were particularly interesting because they called for a digital ID system as well as a digital financial system that would both help facilitate a move towards a central bank-backed digital currency. The proposal for the digital ID is filled with a ton of the standard stated benefits that go along with people that support this sort of thing and CBDCs. We're talking about cost savings for citizens, reducing fraud, enhancing individual verification, and also proposed as a means to improve regulatory compliance or streamline how governments monitor and report complex transactions. And it also will help us prepare for the future and our ability to conform to new cybersecurity practices in the new digital economy. And beyond these things, we don't get much further insight into why these things are really being proposed. For that, we have to follow a little bit of a trail of breadcrumbs, you might say. So back in 2018, a similar plan for a digital ID was proposed by the Canadian Bankers Association in a paper titled Canada's Digital ID Future, a Federated Approach. In this paper, the authors lay out how an ideal digital ID system would be federated, meaning a person's electronic identity and attributes are stored across distinct but linked identity management systems. So you might have identification as it pertains to your state ID or your driver's license or healthcare services or taxes or financial systems. Under a federated system, you would have one ID that links together all of this information. Now, if you're as skeptical about all of these machinations of the political elite and all of that as I am, you would hear this and immediately start worrying about the centralization of information and data, enhanced ability for the governments to better track your movements and actions, and maybe most importantly, the potential foundation that this would create that might serve as a comprehensive way to maybe score your social credit. I don't know. The paper by the Canadian Bankers Association came out just 2 years after the release of a similar paper produced by the World Economic Forum titled A Blueprint for Digital Identity. This paper is much longer and much more comprehensive, and it takes into account input from a whole host of Great Reset and ESG supporters, including MasterCard and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley. And Andy, if you have that up on the screen, page 12, you can actually see a nice cross-section of all the different people that had input into this World Economic Forum report. It's basically every bank and every credit. That's the page right there. Scroll up a little bit there, and you could just see all the people that have input into the potential digital ID system that we might all once have to operate under. So this paper goes through the details of creating a digital ID system while also pointing out the potential pitfalls. One of those pitfalls being stakeholder rejection. It says users may not adopt the system due to poor design or distrust in the system's purpose or structure. Yeah, that stakeholder distrust is really getting in the way of some of these plans by the World Economic Forum. And an example of this is shown with an article headline showing a growing opposition to India's digital ID system because of fears of surveillance. I'm there with you, everybody that has that growing fear. And perhaps this paper should have expanded on that section a bit, because the comments made during the recent G20 Summit about digital ID surely would leave a sour taste in many people's mouths. The European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who is not the bad person from The Little Mermaid, promoted the idea of a digital ID by comparing it to the COVID vaccine passport. Of course, what's going to help resonate with your average day person than bringing up that terrible nightmare from a few years ago? The quote from the commissioner says, "Many of you are familiar with the COVID-19 digital certificate. The EU developed it for itself. The model was so functional and so trusted that 51 countries on 4 continents adopted it for free." And this quote was revealed 2 things to me when I first read it. One is just how out of touch these people are. Like, at least to the interests of your everyday American, who is very against this idea of a COVID passport. But 2, I think it also kind of shows the uniformity that is expected from a plan like this. And if the goal is to have an ID system that conforms and is inoperable to a wide range of countries, you're going to need a lot of major coordination between all of the countries, potentially global in scope when it comes to rolling out a digital ID. And before you dismiss any of this as just the lofty goals of the global elites, just remember that these ambitious plans and global organizations are incredibly well connected and incredibly influential. And oftentimes the things that they say and do go largely ignored, and they go ignored at our own peril. And that is why I started Davos Watch, where every week I intend to shine a light on some element of the global elites. And I hope you stay tuned so that you can stay informed.